Welcome to the Mount Rushmorons, the show where we definitively rank the top 4 in film, series, wrestling, and pop culture. I'm your host, Chris Brennan, and with me are my illustrious co-hosts, writer, director, and editor Paul Bush, and the reigning, defending RCW champion, Richie Owens. Guys, welcome to the show again.
Good to see you.
Okay, Chris, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of these big introductions for me. Big introductions for Paul.
Well, I only get a middle size when I feel like that.
There was
enthusiasm. It was enthusiastic.
Yeah.
It was enthusiastic. It was, yeah. It was.
He got the accolades in, but I think Chris, you're a host, you're a friend. We love you. I think you deserve a bit more. So I'm going to give you something. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the Mount Rushmorons podcast proudly brings to you. Is he American? Is he German? Is he Irish? Nobody knows. But what we do know is he's got the filmmaker's infinity gauntlet. He's a writer. He's a cinematographer. He's a director. He's an actor. He can do it all. But listen, don't let this beautiful face fool you, because he will break your heart. Not only is he a heartbreaker, but he's a story breaker. He'll hit you with that knife-edge chop while he educates you with his writing chops. He is our Lord. He is our champion. He is our savior. He is the host of the Mount Rushmorons podcast, Christopher Brennan! Brennan!
That was good.
Okay.
Chris, it's not going to get any better than that.
I got to step my game up.
Jesus.
Okay. I can do better.
How long did that take to prepare, Richie?
I prepared it in my head, and I was like, I think I can one take these. I've done enough wrestling promos, and I think I'm better. But I realized with unless it's something really detailed, I'm better at really over rehearsing. But when it comes to stuff like that, if I have the bullet points, I can usually just do it in one go. I just pretended I was in front of a crowd.
I was trying to get in the Killers Within feature, but what trips me up is you're the co-writer and co-director of that. So how do I bridge from writer-director to Andy with somebody else? With Brian O'Neill. I was like, I need some more wrestling promo practice, which actually is the topic of our day, is wrestling. We wanted to get in there pretty soon because we do have the reigning. No, we do.
No, not again.
We do have a champion with us. And we wanted to take up a topic that was near and dear to our wrestling hearts. So today, we're going to be definitively ranking wrestling finishing moves. And funny enough, Richie has a finishing move that this guy named.
Well, for those that don't know, the common denominator and the reason why we all kind of met up in the first place, whatever that was 10, 15 years ago, was wrestling. We went to live events, we started group chats talking about wrestling. Obviously, we have other common interests, but it kind of all started with the whole common interest in wrestling. So, I think, without wrestling, we probably wouldn't be doing this podcast, so.
True. That is true. Yeah. That bridged us all together. So let's kick it over to Paul first, and let's get a little bit of background on wrestling for him. Paul, what's up with wrestling with you? You still a fan? You were a fan? How long you watch it? Give us your wrestling take.
Okay, so I'll always remember I watched it as a kid, then stopped, got distracted, and I hate that thing. Oh, I watched it as a kid. It's not a kid's thing. It's for all ages. But I just happened to not watch it. I started watching other stuff. And then I remember a couple of lads in school had DX kind of football jerseys they'd wear during lunch. I didn't know what it was. Someone said it's wrestling. I was like, okay, wearing wrestling t-shirts. I'd never seen that, over their clothes. And he said, "Did you see WrestleMania 17?" I said, I didn't. And he brought in a VHS recording of it. And I said, I'll watch it. And I fucking swear to God, I just fell in love straight away. It was
a pretty good WrestleMania.
It was the best. It's still the best. It's still the best. It's still the best. Incredible. Straight away fell in love with it as soon as I was like, oh my God, okay, now I get what they're all on about. For anyone who doesn't know, this was Rock Austin, this was TLC, this was Shane versus Vince, this was I think it was also that mad hardcore match between Big Show, Raven, and Kane. It was insane. It was an insanely good wrestling, and Triple H, Undertaker as well. I don't think it's been bested personally, but anyway. So got into it, started going into HMV, buying VHSs of pay-per-views, getting into it, working in a video store. Buddy, new guy started there. He loved wrestling. Started
Mm,
staying up late at night, watching the pay-per-views and his gaff.
mm,
Just kept going like that
mm,
for years. Met you boys. We'd go to the Woolshed. We'd watch some of the pay-per-views there. Kept up to
mm.
date. Got more into the background of wrestling. Like loved the behind-the-scenes stuff. What you call the dirt sheets, the dirt websites. Loved the politics of it
Yeah.
all and all. All that kind of stuff. Me and my friends, we all got addicted to SmackDown on PlayStation 2. And we just have these tournaments we create around wrestlers, and we would
Mm,
just spend ages playing this stuff. So yeah, I love it.
mm.
Love it. Later, like the last few years, I keep track of it. I haven't watched it as much. Oh yeah, the other thing was I got to film Balor or Prince Devitt or Fergal Devitt. Fergal ran NWA Ireland, and they wanted a video of a pay-per-view. So my friend put me forward, said, "Oh, guy in college likes wrestling." So myself and Brian O'Neill and Niall turned up and we filmed it, and it was fucking amazing, amazing event. Couldn't believe what I was watching,
That's so
So
cool.
yeah, they
That's
had an
really
incredible
cool.
like triple threat ladder match that I'll never forget. Like probably one of the best ladder matches
Mm.
I've ever seen.
Was that the ladder match with Paddy Morrow in it? Was it?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, okay.
and it was the metal ladders that folded in
Mm,
three places.
mm,
I
mhm,
remember Fergal saying to me, "Yeah, I went to buy like the normal ladders and woodies, and I didn't have any, so I just bought these mad
mm,
metal ladders,
mm.
and we'll come up with mad shit to do." I was like, "Okay, good
Oh
luck."
wow.
And then like we made the DVD, and he sold it at other
Yeah.
events and stuff. But yeah, but no, I
Mm.
loved it. Like
That's
it's
really
really
cool.
good.
So whenever you had you're playing your characters in the video game, you created
Mm.
your own. What was your wrestler's name?
These were the shittest names, and I don't know why I
Yeah,
kept them.
exactly.
I've no idea. Like Keltar was one of them. It was like the worst name ever.
Keltar.
Keltar.
Keltar, yeah. I don't know where
Keltar.
with a K, not a
Keltar.
C. I know.
Whoa,
And I
whoa.
always had
Oh,
like a high flyer. I had two characters always, a high flyer
yeah.
type guy, and then like a middle heavyweight guy.
Yeah.
Because depending on who you need to call out for the match, how you wanted to finish. But
You know,
yeah.
I can actually redo the intro if you want. I can announce you as Keltar if you want.
Keltar.
Ladies and
Keltar
gentlemen,
had
it's
the shittiest hair, man. It's all right, like
Keltar. Yeah.
Keltar. I can't
With a
remember the
K.
other character's name. Like Richie, I see a video game in your background there. Is that from the N64 or what?
That's WCW versus NWO Revenge, which is probably still my favorite wrestling video
Okay.
game of all time. I absolutely love it. It was one of the original ones from THQ and Acclaim before they went on after this to make like WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy and stuff in the N64, which obviously is they're more beloved than this.
Yeah, yeah, no
But this one
mercy
just
is,
has
yeah.
this one holds a place in my heart. I absolutely love it. And actually, when I first started wrestling, my tag team partner, Steve OG, shout out Steve OG, we were like childhood friends, didn't talk for like whatever 10 years or something like that. We became a tag team, started tagging together, and then when I found my old cartridge for WrestleMania 2000, I had lent it to Steve when we were kids, and he had created his character of himself, which I found that was still on
Brilliant.
the card from years ago. So it was kind of just a nice little kind of throwback there. But yeah, one of the best wrestling games of all time.
I have a similar story to Paul actually, except I watched it when I was a kid. You know, Hulkamania, Running Wild, Brother, Macho Man, that kind of thing. Then grew up, and it was around the same time, Attitude Era. I was in junior high, moving to high school, and I was just wondering why everybody kept telling me to suck their dick. I was like, what is going on? I have no context. And they're like, you're a degenerate. And I'm like, what is this? I don't know. Whose role should I know? And I was like, I don't understand any of this. Like, it just took over the high school in that period. And I didn't have cable. My parents refused to get cable for the longest time. So we eventually get cable. And I finally watched WWF Raw, and I think this was actually the first match. This is the Raw that came after the Hell in a Cell match with Undertaker and Mankind. So they're showing like replays of that match, and I'm like, this is not Macho Man against
Mm.
Brutus the Barber Beefcake. This is something else is happening here. And so yeah, it just dominated my high school at that point. Like everybody's just kept catching stunners. Everybody's doing the DX chop, and it just took over. Yeah, was out of it for a bit, then kind of swept back in when I met you guys. And yeah, I don't really watch it too much now. I am similar to what Paul said. I'm actually very intrigued with the background politics and kind of the shenanigans that happen behind the scenes. I think it's just super interesting when creativity and decision making kind of combines together. And what you get are lots of interesting dramas along the way. And how about you, Richie? I mean, since you're in the biz, I imagine
well,
you like wrestling.
Yeah, well, I do, and I think what Paul said is very interesting because I think everyone has kind of had their times where they've been in and out of wrestling. It's like, oh, I watch it during the Attitude Era, I watch it during Hogan, I watch it during this. I think everyone, even if you're not kind of more fans like we were, there's a point where you have been, you've seen some sort of wrestling in your life. Anyone can say that, even people that aren't wrestling fans, they'll have been exposed to it in some way, shape, or form. For me, it's always kind of been part of my life. Like my dad always brags that like I was asleep in my crib while him and my mother watched WrestleMania 3, and like it was always kind of there. My dad was never a huge fan, but he always kind of appreciated wrestling, and was always a huge fan since a kid. I kind of remember around WrestleMania 10 to 12 was when it really started to click with me. I remember like thinking Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart Iron Man match was like the most important thing in the world at the time. There was a time in my 20s where I kind of fell off a little bit around maybe 2010, 2011, wasn't watching as much as I do now. But it's always kind of been a part of my life. Obviously, 8 years ago now, I took the step to become a professional wrestler, and that changed my whole perspective and whole life around wrestling. I've been exposed to so many things. I've met so many interesting people. I can brag all day about the people I've met, like Becky Lynch and, Finn Balor and all these people that I've just kind of crossed paths with. But becoming a wrestler has changed how I feel about wrestling, changed how I watch wrestling, how I consume wrestling, and definitely has made me appreciate it a little bit more. In the 8 years I've got to wrestle, I've got to achieve some pretty amazing things. Like this year alone, I got to wrestle James Storm, who's like a former TNA world champion who beat Kurt Angle. I wrestled him this year. Last year, I had a singles match with Eric Young, who's also in TNA. This Friday, actually, by the time this goes out, it won't be this Friday, but I'll be tagging with Paul London, who's an ex-WWE champion. So I've got to do some pretty incredible things. But you know me, guys, I like to do show and tell. We're on the podcast, so one thing I wanted to show. So this is probably the thing that I'm most proud about, which would be like my Irish tag team title, which I'm a 3-time champion. And this belt that you mentioned, NWA Ireland, Paul, this belt actually goes back to the old NWA days. You can see on it there, it has the actual NWA symbol on it. So this title now is actually over 20 years old. So Balor was actually involved in like getting these created. He was around when these were actually made. They're this old. But the interesting thing about this is now I'll have to probably pop something up after because you can't actually read it on it. But engraved on the actual belt strap here is this belt was actually created by a guy called Reggie Parks. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Reggie Parks before. He is I'm not going to hold it like a belt. He's a Canadian wrestler who was trained by Stu Hart, but he wrestled, had a decent amount of success as a wrestler, but more famously, he became a belt designer. And not only to design this absolutely fantastic belt, which has lasted the test of time over 20 years, he also designed the original Intercontinental Championship and the original WWF Winged Eagle title, the Hogan title. He actually designed all of those belts, and unfortunately passed away in 2021. But I think that's pretty cool that like this guy who's known as the guy who was like the greatest belt maker of all time made the championship belt that I currently hold, which is, I think that's pretty goddamn cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. And if you look up Reggie Parks, like he's really cool. He's designed a lot of really, really cool belts. So that's one other interesting thing. Just because you mentioned it, Chris Moore's show and tell, this is pretty cool. Like, and it's like I never thought when I was like 10-year-old guy when I was watching those WrestleManias, watching Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, whoever else, that I would actually have my own action figure. So this is a custom made by a fan that was made a couple of years ago. And the reason I wanted to show it, because you actually mentioned it, because it says on the back of this, under signature moves, it says running power slam, and it says call to action. So just to explain to the audience a little bit, the call to action is our finishing move, which is basically a variation of the Motor City Machine Guns, who are actually WWE Tag Team Champions at the moment, which is I get the guy for a Dominator, and Andy runs in and kind of does a cutter as I slam them into the mat. And the name call to action, I didn't come up with myself. Our lovely host came up with it. And I think you can explain where that came from, if you like.
Yeah, so when you first started, we actually met up to workshop your first promo, and we were talking about how promos are actually marketing because the call to action in a promo is come to the Civic Center on Saturday, June 7th, you know? So I was like, that's the call to action. Oh, actually, that would actually be a pretty fun finisher because it's also called a CTA, which is very similar to like things that are chanted by the audience, like GTS, CTA. I was like, that does sound pretty nice. And it even worked even better when you moved from the video game enthusiast character to the motivational speaker, because then the call to action really resonates.
It always kind of tickles me when I hear someone say it on commentary, or even if like I'm like planning a match backstage and someone's like, well, you can get me up for the call to action. And I always just think of Chris. It's like, Chris came up with that. It's just like, it's a common thing now that people know that that's the name of our finisher move. So I think that's pretty cool that, you know, it shows that I take input on board. Like you get me something and I ran with it.
When it comes to storytelling, and wrestling is storytelling, a good ending can make or break a film. And for wrestling, I believe one of the biggest moments of an ending would be the finisher. It's super important. And sometimes even my favorite characters in wrestling have frustratingly awful finishing moves that I go, I would like you more if you didn't do that to end your matches. So I'm a big believer in you've got to find the right finishing move. That's why we wanted to kick this episode off, the wrestling topic off in general, by focusing on the Mount Rushmore of finishing maneuvers. So who wants to go first with their first nomination?
Well, I think I went first last time, so I think Paul should jump in with the first one.
I'll counter that. I went first for horror, and I'm going to flip it on the host. I'm going to say, Chris, you go first this time. Catch you off guard. All right, catch you off guard. I want you to go first.
Yeah, we're calling it in the ring. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
On the fly. On the fly.
Yeah. Sweet. So the first nomination I have, it'll go back to the 80s, and this is timeless in my opinion, but when I watched it, it was the most impactful. And that's Macho Man Randy Savage's elbow drop. So in the context of this, when I started watching it, I distinctly remember the Hulk Hogan leg drop and then the Ultimate Warrior splash. They're just like bouncing off the ropes and running up and just kind of dropping on them. Then there's this lunatic getting to the top of the ropes and leaping from there to elbow somebody right in the heart. I was like, well, clearly that's going to do more damage. And I was just amazed by it. It had so much going for it too, because it had that pageantry, the build up, the setup, a bit of the showmanship at the top. I was like, well, there's so much going on with this move. It still works as a finisher today, even though there's lots more flashy and flamboyant maneuvers and even more skillful ones. I would also argue that a few of the skillful ones don't really have as much impact anyway. So you're doing a lot of nothing until you actually hit the person, because in the end, if this is supposed to be a fight, the impact is what matters. So you have the simplicity and the elegance of Macho Man doing his wheeling and dealing until he gets to the top rope and then just crushes his opponent as he hits them. So yeah, for me, Macho Man's elbow drop is number one with a bullet. Yeah, it's the cream of the crop, Rich. Cream of the crop.
I think that's a really good shout. And I think that I think right now, as we're kind of setting this up, I think if there is, it's not in this case, because I think Macho Man has always done the best elbow ever. There's no one that kind of competes with that. Kairi Sane does a pretty insane one, but I think Macho Man, nobody has ever done a better elbow than Macho Man. But if we do, with the Mount Rushmore, we fall into an area where it's a move that a lot of people do well. I say we just select the move. We might get to that soon as well, but if that does come up. But I think in this case, it is specifically the Macho Man elbow, because his one is better than any other elbow that ever existed. And yeah, I think it's a good one. It's on my list as well. So yeah, leave it in.
Oh yeah.
Just all right. He's on our logo.
Yeah, he's on our logo.
So I think we've put a backed ourselves into a corner here. If we don't put him and his move on the Mount Rushmore, our logo may go in the bin. So no, but
he's gonna be nominated in like best film categories. It's like, well, he's not even involved with this, and it's like, yeah, Macho.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
That's cool. It's a great move, and I like what you said about how a lot of moves that are the big moves with our big wrestlers just feel like it's like a hug. particularly the Ultimate Warriors one just feels like a
Mm.
nothing. But
Yeah.
his actually, you see that the point of the elbow come down, it
Mm.
does feel like he's going to kill the guy, and then he just bounces up
Mm.
so quickly. I don't know how he could even walk after that jump. So that's a great pick.
One other thing on it, I like that you said that that he had the pageantry and he had the setup. So
Mm.
I think that's quite important for, especially for a move like that where there is steps and setups. He has to climb the top ropes. He has to set it up. There's no this isn't coming out of nowhere or anything like that. So you need a proper setup, and he did that so well. You knew before he even went to the top rope what he was going to do because he just set it up so well.
All right. Sweet.
Good.
So who goes next? Who's up? I think it's going to be Richie.
So I'm going to go in. I always start with a big one. I can't help myself. I just have to do it. And I really feel like this is probably the most important wrestling move of all time. I think I wouldn't be a pro wrestler. I don't think we're having this conversation. I don't think these video games are on behind me. I don't think any of this happened if Hulk Hogan didn't drop a leg drop on Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. Pontiac Silverdome, 78,000 people, the most important moment in wrestling history. Regardless of what you think about Hulk Hogan, who's the best wrestler of all time, that moment changed wrestling forever. And that move has been part of so many important moments for Hulk Hogan, whether it's all the title wins, whether it's everything else, it always ended with him jumping and dropping that leg drop. Further on his career, if we ever do Mount Rushmore best wrestling matches, my favorite, and I think the greatest wrestling match of all time, is WrestleMania 18, The Rock and Hulk Hogan. I think it's the perfect wrestling match. The best moment in that, which was probably, again, my favorite moment in any wrestling match, is when, a bit of context, Hogan goes in as the heel, the bad guy, Rock goes in as the good guy, and the crowd is this like crazy, ridiculous, hardcore Canadian wrestling fans that just loved Hogan so much that midway through the match, they have to change it where like Hogan becomes the good guy and Rock becomes the bad guy. And that moment where Hogan becomes the good guy with the leg drop. Final point on it, it's like the most significant and most important heel turn in the history of professional wrestling is when Hollywood Hulk Hogan came out, joined the NWO, and dropped a leg drop on your boy Macho Man Randy Savage, and turned heel. If Hulk Hogan doesn't turn heel, we don't get the Attitude Era. We don't get Steve Austin. We don't get the Vince McMahon character. We don't get the success that wrestling became after that. So I'm going to say that the Andre moment and the heel turn moment are so significant to the success and growth of professional wrestling that I think the leg drop needs to go on the Mount Rushmore. And also, it's very important to say as well that is such a simple move that anyone can do, that you will probably, if you turn on AEW or turn on WWE, you will probably see a leg drop within the whole context of the show. But it's how Hogan did that leg drop. Hogan's leg drop is different to any other leg drop, kind of similar to the elbow as well. But I think it's a simple move, which I do understand, but Hogan made it much more than that. And it's so important for the reasons I stated. I think it's defined pro wrestling, made pro wrestling what it is. Obviously, Hulk Hogan has, but that move has been part of him the whole way.
Interesting. What do you think of that, Paul?
Didn't think we were going to get a history lesson along with our moves. Holy shit. What I'd say is, I think that's a really good point. Really well thought. You obviously thought about this in detail. My only counter to that would be that I don't think the move matters. I think it was who was doing the move. So I think he could have done Sweet Chin Music. He could have done an elbow drop. He could have done, I don't know, the Warriors finish. He could have done any finish. I think it was the person, not the move, if that makes sense. So it's like the character.
He didn't do any other move. He did a leg drop.
I know, but in terms of like best finishing move, like I think it was the fact that he turned heel. It wasn't that he used a leg drop to like. You know what I mean? The people were popping off because he turned heel, not because of the move. So that'd be my only counter to that. But I think it was like an excellent point.
But if you think
really,
about it, like
really
just like, I feel like we're getting into the deliberations already. But if you feel like when he gets in the ring for that moment in the NWO and he drops a leg drop, if he punches Randy Savage or if he knees Randy Savage or he slams him, it's not as impactful as he hits the leg drop. When he dropped the leg drop on Andre the Giant, you knew that the match was over because the leg drop was over because Hogan had the leg drop over. It doesn't matter how good it is; it was over because it was him. You know, I take Hulk Hogan out of it, and the leg drop was a standalone move. I agree, but the significance Hogan brought to his one, because when he hit it, watch the crowd erupt. They know that that's it. Like, you know,
this will be a hard deliberation now. I already
It will
know. This is gonna be tough. Wow. Okay.
because like everything you said about the impact and the importance and the significance is totally right. And it's really good argument to have because we kind of curate the top four with specific features and attributes. But when you were saying that, I was like, oh my God, imagine if it was an elbow drop instead. I was like, imagine if it was something like good, like it's such, even when I was a kid, I remember like watching it. Oh, the body slam was like, oh, that's more iconic in the Andre the Giant moment. But like, yeah, I totally get you though. So you're kind of winning me over on the legacy and the impact.
You know what he's doing?
Industry.
He's doing a 28 days later round. He's like, he's getting the emotional heart. The very thing he gave out about last episode. I don't want to hear this
like,
shit
listen,
what
like,
it meant and all this shit.
You can take something very, very simple and make it your own. A really good example, like, and I'm going to say it now because it's not going to even be considered for the Mount Rushmore, but at some point, the Big Show used a knockout punch as his finisher. And if you think about that, legitimately, he's 500 pounds. He's the biggest man that ever existed in wrestling. If he punched you, you're going to die. So therefore, when the Big Show did a punch, it meant a lot more than anyone else doing a punch. So I think it's not the move, it's the person that makes it.
Interesting.
So that's a really good point. I think maybe this I'll save this for the deliberation. So we're getting into sort of like we're coupling the wrestler with the finish. It's not the finish. It's the wrestler.
Really?
It's wrestler with the finish.
But if you were to mention like I'm sure most, I say 90% of the finishes, if you name the finish first that we're going to pitch today, the wrestler will be associated with straight away. When I say leg drop, people think Hogan. When you say flying elbow, you think Macho Man. I'm not going to give away any other ones that are going to come up. But I think you're automatically going to make an association with the wrestler.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, listen, this is a big pitch, but I'm not going to die in the Hogan Hill. By the way, it's just 4 finishers that are better, or 3 finishers that are better. Don't worry about that. I'm not like you, Paul. I'm not married to all of these like really ridiculous pitches. Okay, I can let go of my version of Frasier or 28 Days Later. Okay.
Where's my comfort key?
Richie's got a keychain full of leg drops.
Just watching Hogan dropping legs all day.
Yeah. Excellent. So, Paul, do you want to go up next?
I think it's going to be obvious where it's coming from. So, as I said, WrestleMania 17 was my big gateway into wrestling. And I'm looking at my list here, and I think it's kind of no surprise that my medium list, a lot of the finishes come from matches at that pay-per-view. I'm torn about what to go with first because I love the elbow drop. I don't really want to go for another one off the turnbuckle. So I think I'm going to go for the Gore by Rhino. So I wasn't that up on wrestling. So if anyone remembers the TLC match at WrestleMania 17, that's where Rhino made his debut. I think it was his debut anyway, wasn't it? And he came in to help Edge and Christian win the match. That was a great match. It was like a three-way tag match. It was the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, and the Hardy Boys. And then everyone had their third come in and help. So we had Spike come in and help. We had Lito come in and help. And we had Rhino come in and help. And Rhino helped Edge and Christian. And even watching the match when I was only fresh, I was kind of like, he doesn't really fit with Edge and Christian, but fuck it, I'll go with it. But his Gore is insane. And when he does that Gore, and Paul Heyman is on commentary screaming, Gore, putting his own guy over because, obviously he was a big ECW guy. It's just, there's so many people that do a spear. Like Edge does a spear, Roman Reigns does a spear, Goldberg does a very good spear. But there's a reason why Rhino's move is called a Gore, because it's bigger, better, more convincing than a spear. I think it's the most convincing spear you'll ever see. Like, you do feel like the guy's turned inside out. Bobby Lashley does an okay spear. This is the best spear. This deserves its own name. You even the description, you're gored by the Rhino's tusk. Yeah,
it's a hell of a name, isn't it?
It's a hell of a name. He's just this fucking freak of nature, like just this bulky guy with sort of like smaller limbs who's just coming at you and sends you halfway across the ring.
It's explosive, isn't it?
It's unbelievable.
It's explosive. It's explosive coming from someone who's built like a vending machine.
Yeah.
It's like
I think it was the
cannonball
size that
anything.
helped. Like him being so small made it so more impactful because whatever way he came, it's different. Like because Goldberg's so huge when he runs with Gore, but because Rhino's kind of smaller, it made it kind of more impactful in a weird way. I don't know if you guys remember, he actually gored Chris Jericho through the SmackDown stage on an episode of SmackDown before. Maybe in like 2001, 2002. That was really cool as well.
Cool. Yeah. And that was, it felt like he was the guy who was originating all that stuff of like goring people through things. And that was probably of the time. Everyone was going through things. But now it feels like we often see someone speared through, the barricade at the side of the ring and that kind of stuff. Like, but it's a fantastic move. Chris, what do you think of it?
I really like it. Yeah, you're always sneaky with your picks. I would never have guessed that you'd go with Gore. I gotta say, it's the spear for me from Goldberg. I'm a big fan of when I first see things, like the first time you see something. So his was just devastating. Probably because it's real.
His was legit.
It's not exactly like a worked maneuver. Like I think he's just legitimately taking his football training and smashing people with it. So I do have a favoritism for that. But like the Gore itself, like it's something else. It also reminds me of this TNA talent as well, named Monty Brown. He did this thing called the Pounce, where like he just kind of like not really like spear you, but he just kind of shoulder bop you. But like he was so ridiculous. Like the person would just go flying. And
he would always do it from the side as well, which kind of made it more impactful because the spear was head on.
Yeah.
But the Pounce was always like they're running this way, the Pounce comes this way. I think he actually pounced the guy out of the ring on an episode of TNA or something like that. It was so big. I really like the Gore as well. I'm kind of with you, Chris, a little bit where I kind of prefer the spear, and the only reason why is that I think that Goldberg's spear and like Roman Reigns' spear and stuff like that, they have so much more impactful moments. Like obviously Roman's spear has like main event so many WrestleManias, but it's not by far the worst spear you'll probably see out of all these guys. I think Goldberg's, especially some of the ones, I don't know if you've ever seen the one he did to Christian in 2003, probably the greatest spear I've ever seen. But I like the pitch on the Gore. Can I ask then, are we just going to cancel out then spears in general? Do we put it all in one category? Are you married to Gore versus spear? Is someone else going to bring up a spear later on, or where do we land on this?
So many people do a spear.
I do a spear. I actually do a spear.
How good is your spear? Play the tape. Let the audience find out. Play the tape.
I'm going to send you the best spear I've ever done.
Send me the best spear. We'll splice. Look, it is a variant on the spear, but there's just something different about the Gore in that two things. One, his size. Maybe it's how people sell it. It just feels when he hits it, the sell is bigger. He can do it from any distance as well. So I kind of feel with Goldberg, it's like a big thing. It's he's standing on the far side of the ring and he's going to run and hit you, and it's an American football tackle. But Gore just feels like it's that move that can come out of nowhere and be devastating, and he can get up and do it again and again and again. And part of finishes that I like is that they can come out of nowhere. And he feels like he's the only one who's able to do that with the spear. Like Edge's one is like, usually they're running the ropes. They'll run the ropes once or twice, and then he'll go into his crouch hug, and that's the move.
It's awful, isn't it?
It's not good. Bar the spear in WrestleMania 17, he did off the ladder into Jeff Hardy, and they both went down.
It was still a hug, though.
I would say, look, Goldberg's spear is brilliant. But I would say...
it's not a finish, though.
It's not his finish. True, it's his setup. But I don't think anyone has a better spear than Rhino for a finish.
Okay.
But open to correction if anyone can pick out a particular one. But as a finish, that's a good point, Chris. It's not Goldberg's finish.
No, it's not.
It's not his
Even
finish.
though I know that Jackhammer's pretty great too, to be honest.
Jackhammer's great. Jackhammer's great.
No, I think as well, like I think Roman's the only one that I can think of, but I think the Gore is better than Roman Reigns' spear.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
You might just get that snuck into the top 4.
If I get that, I'm happy.
Okay, Chris.
Okay, so back to me.
Again,
so I'm gonna go for a submission this time. See if I can slide my my pick in for submission, because I imagine we're going to want a submission on this. But I'm going to go with the ankle lock. And for particular sake, I'm going to go for Ken Shamrock's. I know we can talk about whose is what, but I've loved Ken Shamrock's. He's like the first one I saw. Again, I always am interested with like the first of things. So he was the first one I saw do it. He's just insane. And then personally too, living in Alaska, my brother would work in the evenings. He'd work in Safeway as a bag boy, or what they would call a courtesy clerk. But really, he was a bag boy. He bagged people's groceries, but they didn't want to call them bag boys. So he's a courtesy clerk. And he would get home late. While he was working, I was playing the video games. I was playing WCW NWO Revenge. The fruit of his labor was coming my way. And he would take that out on me when he'd get home full of energy and just whip an ankle lock on me. So, I've been on the receiving end of many, many ankle locks. But I love it. I love the cleanness, the simplicity of it, and just the effectiveness. There's a lot of submissions I see where I'm going, clearly his head is right here. Just, poke him in the eye or like, just do something to like he's right there. They're sitting there screaming. They're doing their little narrative, their pageantry of the pain. And it's like, yeah, but you can solve this problem. And it always takes me out of it. The ankle lock is one where I'm like, yeah, what do you do? I know firsthand or first foot what I can't do anything. So I like it. There's probably other submissions that people prefer, but for me, I think that's got to be like the best one. Yeah. And then if you want to take it that other level where there's another stage to it that Kurt Angle would do where he drop down and like wrap his legs around it. And I even like when submissions have this tier system of maneuvers. But I got to go with my boy, Ken Shamrock. When I started watching it again as a teenager, like that one, I was like, oh my God, that is just brutal. But the simplicity of it was something I really appreciated.
Yeah, that's really good. That's one of the ones where I kind of like, maybe it's more so the move than who actually did the move, because I think Kurt Angle's is so iconic, and I love Kurt's for so many different reasons. There's a great match with The Undertaker and Kurt Angle from maybe 2003, where the entire match, Kurt Angle just keeps finding ways to put on the ankle lock, and every single one of them is different. And you never see Undertaker have a match like that, where the whole match revolves around, if he can get that ankle lock on, he's going to win. And that was the story of the match. And the grapevine was obviously a great part of that as well. What I liked about Ken Shamrock's was that when he had on and he had like snapped, you couldn't get him to take it off. You know what I mean? It was like he had a vice grips on. You'd have people come up and like hit him with chairs, and he's not letting go of that ankle. Like, let's hold it on like forever. But I think that like if we did get down to like putting it on the Mount Rushmore, I think I'd feel a bit more comfortable if it was just the ankle lock, because I think Angle's is as important as Ken Shamrock's. So how do we feel about that?
I have the angle lock on mine, because I think when it's on my list as well. I think like when you have someone who perfects the move and it has kind of a name, the ankle lock, and obviously works with his name, the angle lock, but like when they bring it to that next level, and as you guys both pointed out, the grapevine, he made it tiered. It just felt so dangerous. Now, I'll admit I wasn't really around watching wrestling for Ken Shamrock, but I've seen clips and it's terrifying. Yeah. So he sold it so well, But I do love it's the intensity is there, but I loved it and knew it from Kurt and saw it in so many matches, and it was he had two finishes. Well, third, he had the moonsault sort of thing as well. But I'd be going with the ankle lock, but if we couldn't get there, I'd go with the ankle lock, because I think to me, it's one of the most convincing finishers.
I could even see the ankle lock though, because one person took it, like it was a mid-card submission and then it became a main event submission. So more people know it as Kurt Angle's. Totally fine. I do want to give Shamrock his flowers though.
Absolutely.
But it's also Kurt Angle, like one of the best who's ever done it. But it's just, my boy was the first one, I think probably the first one who ever did it as well. It's just, it's so associated with Kurt Angle. And then surprisingly, it became an Olympian submission, which makes no sense whatsoever. Because like Jack Swagger did it, did Chad Gable do it?
Yeah.
But they're all just copies of Kurt Angle, though, in fairness. Like, Shamrock did an interview with Chris Van Vliet fairly recently, and the question came up about the ankle lock, and it's like, are you annoyed that Kurt Angle took your ankle lock? And he was like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's like, that move was taught to me. It was taught to him.
Yeah.
It's like, any move is their own. It's not my move. Like, I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, you know, he made it great, but he's not taking away from you. He's not stealing, you know?
I think a great thing as well that elevated the angle lock at the time was who was around him. So Chris Benoit, his finish was a submission. They had a great rivalry. Jericho, he had a submission as a finish as well. So Angle was often in a match with guys who had submissions. And it was that great thing of submission versus submission. And even then you'd have the triple threat matches and all that kind of stuff. And you'd end up with like them all applying their submission on each other.
Yeah.
And it was just crazy.
Like yeah.
And I love that. I love that. Like, you know, and then they'd like maybe have a tag match and you have like, I remember Jericho and Benoit as tag team. And like they'd be both applying their tap out finishes at the same time. It's fucking brilliant. Like it was a great time for submission wrestling.
For sure. All right. Well, I'm feeling good now. I got two.
That's real good. Real good.
Yeah. I don't need too much persuasion when it comes to the next section. But like now, let's move on to Richie's next option.
Are you ready for a 10-minute passionate promo? No, it's not. It's not. I've got a couple more, so we'll hopefully get you quite quickly. I'm going to go with something a little bit different. I'm following the flow of what you guys are picking and stuff like that. So I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. I'm going to go with a strike. I'm going to go with probably one of the best and again, really significant strikes. I'm going to go with Shawn Michaels' Sweet Chin Music. And I obviously think it's a fantastic move. Again, very simple. It's just a super kick. But I think it's what you kind of said about Macho Man, the pageantry around it, the stomping of the foot, you know it's coming. What I really like about this move is that it's, again, something you mentioned, Paul, briefly, is the out of nowhere aspect of it. And there's nothing more out of nowhere than that Sweet Chin Music, because it can literally come from out of nowhere. It can just be something that you can tune up the band and set up, or you can just hit it. There's a great match, a Monday Night Raw match the night after WrestleMania. John Cena and Shawn Michaels have an Iron Man match, which to this day is probably still the best Monday Night Raw match of all time. Yeah. And the finish of that match is like, obviously they've gone 60 minutes. You know, Cena goes for the attitude adjustment. Michaels lands on the feet. He stumbles into the corner. As Cena goes in to get him, he just hits him with Sweet Chin Music literally out of nowhere. The best part of that is that it's his last moment of strength, because when he hits it, the momentum of it, he literally falls onto Cena for the pin. So in my mind, watching it as a wrestling fan, I'm like, if he didn't fall onto him, he would have not have been able to crawl over and pin him. So I think that's quite clever, because he used that momentum just to kind of land on him. And obviously, like a lot of big moments, WrestleMania 12, Ric Flair's retirement, it all kind of revolved around the super quick. But I like the fact that it was a simple move, made great, but the out of nowhere aspects of it is something that makes it really special. So I nominate Shawn Michaels' Sweet Chin Music.
Yeah. It's on my list.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. For all the same reasons you said. I love the out of nowhere, but I love the build. It can be played any way. But I think we're going to, when we put these on the mount, we're going to have to say who it is, because everyone does the super kick. So it's not the super kick. It's Shawn Michaels' super kick. It's Sweet Chin. And it's following that trend of where like he's brought it to a next level. It gets its own name. You know, but
and he got wrecked by lots of other people too.
Yeah,
like I never saw that he slapped his leg. I never saw it. Like I still actually sometimes if I'm watching on YouTube, I'll rewind it going, did he? Like I don't see him do it. But then everybody, like all these other wrestlers now, it's like they're clapping. It's like a round of applause. Like, what are you doing? I clearly see it. Or I've seen somebody, I forget who it was. It was a female wrestler in WWE. I can't remember who it was, but she did a super kick and missed the person. Like it was supposed to be that she missed them, but she slapped her leg. I was like, what? It didn't connect with anybody. I was like, come on, guys.
A lot of like veteran wrestlers, if they know a big move like that is coming, is appeared behind the curtain, they would do the slap themselves, which I absolutely hate. So it's like you're giving me the Sweet Chin Music, but as I'm taking it, I slap like that to give you the sound. If I think you're not going to do the sound, which is ridiculous, especially if you miss as well. Because the other guy just looks like an idiot because he's walking in and just slapping his own hands.
Well, that's funny. No, that's a really strong one, to be honest. And again, it makes sense if you're kind of curating the mountain. Like you'd have a strike. So you've got a high risk move, a submission, a strike. It's a tough one to say no to. But the only problem would be like how it's just been like just oversaturated and the move itself isn't as impactful, like the DDT, you know? Like when Jake the Snake would hit that, it was like, oh my gosh, that's insane. Now it's just it's like the second move in a match and the person springs back up. But it's like, oh, but when he did it, and it was the motivation behind it, the devastation, and that was like, that's what it was like. You stay down. Now it's just a setup to the next backflip.
Yeah.
But so that's my only thing with the Sweet Chin music is just how it's just been completely oversaturated within the entire industry for a couple of decades now. But to be honest, it is its own thing too. So we'll see what happens at the nomination round.
You're absolutely right. No, everything you said, like Young Bucks and stuff like that, they ruined it. Hitting a million super kicks and matches and stuff like that changed it. I'm hoping that the power of it being Shawn Michaels and him making it his own will make it stand out. But the move has definitely lost its value in the last 20 years or so.
I'm not too caught up with it being cheapened because, again, his has its own name. It's not super kick. It's Sweet Chin music. Okay. It's not a super kick. It's beyond that. That is true. So, and that's why I think it's for me. It's going on the mountain, but we'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
Am I up next?
Paul, you're up next.
Here we go. Okay.
What you got? What you got? A little stink face action?
This is going to be the fucking wildest move ever. This is going to be the wildest move in history. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Oh, it's a Rikishi stink face. No, it's not. No, it's you guys are mowing through my list, so I'm going to go to another thing on my list, which is the Dudley Boys 3D.
Oh snap!
Again, it's all WrestleMania 17. Sorry, boys, or that era of wrestling. But like when I was younger, watching wrestling, my preferred matches were the tag team matches. I always loved tag team wrestling. Yeah, and I loved the Hart Foundation.
And you're a co-filmmaker as well.
Well, maybe that's it. I just like teamwork in things. And I always kind of thought like...
You like teamwork?
Yeah, I do. I like teamwork. And it's like, even like, you know, watching tennis for doubles, there's more going on. It's more frenetic, you know, especially to a mind like mine. That's
as you're speaking, Drew McIntyre's behind you.
That's it. It's my tag team. I'm going to tag him in later. He's going to give us the last round. Like I loved all the tag team. I loved the Rockers, the Orient Express, the Bushwhackers coming out like that. I was, you know, there were so many great tag teams. It was a great tag team era when I was younger, and then when I came back to it, it was really the tag team era. You know, and they were just even like lumping guys together to make tag teams because the tag team division meant something then. And nothing is better than a great tag team finish. And I think the 3D, for a lot of the reasons we've already mentioned, other finishes are good, is excellent. It often came out of nowhere. And the whole crowd pops. Everyone chants 3D. And then bang, they're on the ground and they flip over and they're pinned. There was variance obviously through the table. It could be a big setup, a big tension piece. The person was floating around, they're just taking a punch and, you know, they're going to turn around into the 3D or they're not, or it could come out of nowhere. So I think it's just a really adaptable finish.
I kind of have an opinion on that. I don't know whether, like, do we have a separate category further down the line for tag team finishers? Is there enough that we do a Mount Rushmore separately, or do we just get them all in there now? There's only one or two tag ones that would possibly make the list. Like Legion of Doom had the Doomsday device, which was pretty devastating as a tag finish. I think the 3D is probably the top one. Also one of the most protected finishes. I don't think anyone kicked out of it until like the later stages of TNA or something like that, when those boys were like kind of winding down anyway. But during like the WrestleMania 17 WWF,
did they?
I think they did, yeah. But like it was built up in a way. But like before that, it was like always protected. No one ever kicked out of the 3D.
Meant something.
But do we think we stick with just singles for the topic of the list, or do you think we just do it all as one category now?
I really like it, actually. I really enjoy that. I mean, it's no CTA, let's be honest. But like,
what is though? What is?
No. Yeah, 3D. I really like it because also you've got things like stunners and RKOs and diamond cutters. But that's what this is. It just has that other element of it's a tag team move. So if you're going to have Sweet Chin music as in the Mount Rushmore, there's a way to get that cutter kind of maneuver in, but it's actually celebrating another aspect of wrestling, which is tag teams. I didn't have any tag team moves, actually. So I'm thinking, actually, why not? why wouldn't it go in? Because technically it's a wrestling finisher.
Yep.
We didn't say singles finishers. So I actually can see an argument for putting that in because it fulfills a couple of other ones that for me, I'm going, well, Sweet Chin music is the out of nowhere. So what is the out of nowhere that it replaces? And I think we just found a way, for me anyway, to get an argument to be putting that version back into it. So I'm cool with going for a tag team one on our list.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good.
All right. So I'm up next, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm going to go with Triple H's Pedigree. No even preamble. Let's go straight into it. When I was trampoline wrestling, when I was 16 years old, that was my maneuver. And I would just unlimited power, just spam the person. Like I had this friend Camden who was like, "Would you stop giving me pedigrees?" And we would film it from with a camera. So it was the worst match because I look at it back and I'm like, I hit like 6 pedigrees on him in one match. It's like, this is insane. I love it. I don't know. It's a bit of a setup to it, but again, I enjoy that. Like there is a bit of the tension in how he does it. I mean, first off, it's a devastating move if you wanted to look at it as reality. Like he's just driving your face straight into the mat. That's always a big thing for me with a finisher. That does it feel legitimate? As much as I enjoy The Rock, the People's Elbow has just been so farcical that I could never really get my head around it. Whereas something like the Pedigree, I go, that does legitimately look like it would put you down. But I do like the kind of setup. It doesn't have that showmanship of the elbow drop or the Sweet Chin music, but it has a bit of a struggle to it too. So when he's like when Triple H is like worn out, like you get one shoulder up and the other, and the commentators get that room to breathe to like really sell the drama. Is he gonna hit it? Is he gonna? It was so protected that like barely anybody would kick out of it for a while. And up until recently, he was like the only one who did it. Like it was like he created it. I'm not sure if he actually invented it, but it was his version of it. And like nobody would do it for like 2 decades, which is pretty impressive. So for me, it's the King of Kings.
That's a really convincing argument. I love that move, but sometimes the way you've described it, that it had that other aspect to it of like when the match went on, they're getting tired. Can he lock it in to get it? And that drama around delivering that. Like I know Rollins did it for a bit because he was stuck for a finish. He wasn't allowed to do the curb stomp anymore, but it wasn't like his. So no, I think that's a really.
He would just let go of him, wouldn't he? He would just like completely.
But Triple H sort of lets go of them now as well and pushes them down just to be safe.
Early on, he didn't, and they looked pretty dangerous early on.
They did,
He did change that. Yeah, I think what I like about the Pedigree is like, especially from an actual wrestler's point of view, is that it's a very reversible move because like he sets it up, you can do a backdrop out of it, you can pull out the legs and do a pin, you can spin around and do a pin. So there's a lot of ways you can get out of the Pedigree, so it actually makes it more entertaining from a wrestling point of view. But yeah, really good.
Yeah, great.
Nice. So Richie, you're up next. What do you got for us?
Okay, I think we've got a little bit of an elephant in the room that hasn't really been mentioned. I was hoping one of you guys would bring it up. I know it's on Paul's list. I know for a fact it's on Paul's list because he mentioned a pay-per-view and it's in the main event. So I think we need to talk about the Stone Cold Stunner. I think that it is probably the most famous wrestling finish of all time. I think I've probably seen more Stone Cold Stunners than I have of any other finisher move because he would just hit a million on every show. Actually, in the early days of watching Raw, I used to like videotape all my Raws and I had all the tapes. And then I got a computer and I found a way of like digitizing them. And then later on in life, I started adding more and more. And I had this whole collection of Stone Cold Stunners on my computer. And what I did then was I put them on this little USB key and I would bring it with me when I was traveling and I would watch it as like, a way of just kind of comforting myself when
That's
I
a deep cut. That's a deep cut.
And I would just watch Austin hitting stunners. But no, but
I just have some Steve Weisers that comfort myself.
But I just think it's a huge part of my life, my childhood. Seeing him hitting Vince McMahon, seeing him win WrestleManias, I think it's a very simple move that just got so over that the pop of a stunner you'll never beat. Well, Austin had the biggest pops of all time, and I think it deserves to be at least considered because it's the Stone Cold fucking Stunner, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
And Linda McMahon took it.
She did. Well, she did really badly. Donald Trump took the worst one, I think.
Honestly, I don't even know how you leave that off. That for me, it's like, yeah, it's what brought a ton of us back into enjoying wrestling. And he was on the front of that boat, on the front of that ship, leading the way with that ridiculous move, which was so fun because even to the point where it got to that level where you just knew it was coming and they would like tease you with it. He'd be giving beers to people and you're like, you're actually friends. And like, technically he's not even mad at you, but you know it's going to come anyway. And just that anticipation is as good as the actual result. And when you can get to that point, like that would be amazing. Imagine if Hulk Hogan was just dropping stunners on all of those moments. I think we'd have a different story. But no, he was sitting down on their head. Yeah. No, 100%. I love it. I mean, and also, as I said before, I was just catching stunners all the time at 16 and 17 in high school. I was like, you had to like kind of wear turtlenecks and hide and duck around because you're like, someone's going to catch me with this. It was there before the RKO. It was out of nowhere specifically. I think they even had to start banning it in schools because it was just getting out of hand. So, yeah.
And I think it's one of those ones where, to go back to what I said about the person making the move, if you watched like a random mid-card match before Austin's time and you saw someone hit a stunner, it would be quite underwhelming. But what he made it, because you think about it, it's just a guy landing on another guy's shoulder. It's very simple. It's very basic. But like whatever he did to make that, and that's what made it so special. It's not, as you guys said, it's not about the million rotations for the move. It's about what the person makes of that move. And I think Austin did that like arguably even better than Hogan and better than everyone else because the stunners is just so iconic. I'll talk about it all day. I won't.
I remember the promo piece set to My Way by Limp Bizkit for him and The Rock, their match. And I think it was like the smallest build-up ever. They were like arguing over Deborah being their manager. And then it became fisticuffs. And I think they had like, there was 2 moments of them in the ring that is just edited over and over again. It's the same 3 stunners from like 20 different angles. And The Rock selling it incredibly and spitting beer. And like part of what made the stunner so good was the wrestlers who were around Stone Cold when he was doing it, who could sell it so well. Now, it got to the point where The Rock was kind of like, it was nearly too insane how he was selling it. But like everyone sold it really well. Obviously not the McMahons.
You mentioned people that took it really well. Scott Hall took a great stunner like over the years. Like,
that was the first one that like, I remember seeing that and not going, is that good or is that over the top?
Yeah,
my brain sort of melted for a second. I was like,
I loved it.
Sort of love it, but I sort of think is he taking the piss?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I wasn't
and
sure.
I think as well, like something that Chris said about with the pedigree as well. I like when a finisher is like, I like to call it loaded up, where like it's kick, load up, kick, load up for the pedigree. I just like the idea of like a setup, like you're loading that gun, you're gonna let it drop. I just find that really satisfying as a wrestling move.
Yeah, no, totally.
Agree. No,
totally
I love it. And then there's also what he does afterward, like where he'll like, especially if it's not even in a match, where he just gets in their face and just is barking at them and giving them middle fingers. And he'd always add so much around it, so much garnish and so much expression. Like it was just delicious. So it was like everything surrounding it as well. Like when he'd come out, like they gave him a great nickname of the rattlesnake. Like he's just so uncontrollable. You don't know what he's going to do. Is he going to have a beer with you and be nice? Or is he just going to stomp a mud hole in your ass and walk it dry, you know? So yeah, totally. Nothing else to say on that. Let's start. I'm going to get the chisel now, and I'll see you guys. Yeah, no, for real. Love it. I might even after this watch a couple of compilations. To be honest,
I'll send you the USB. I have my USB.
Come on. Send it on too.
I'll mail it out to you. Yeah.
Old school.
You already have one. You're okay.
All right, Bushman, you're up now. What's your next nomination?
Okay, so you'll kill me, but it's again going back to WrestleMania 17, but it spans a long era. It is.
What year was WrestleMania 17?
Was it 2000? 2001?
2001.
Okay,
yeah, there you go.
That's so close to your 28 days later.
Oh my God!
movie.
Yeah, you're right. Shit, and I still listen to the same music from that era. Oh my God!
The one year Paul consumed media was 2001.
Your media is in Arrested Development for sure.
You will still use mini disc, yeah.
And everything is on USB sticks.
That's it. Yeah. Or zip drives. It's all about the zip discs.
Yeah. All right. What you got for us?
I'm going for the Swanton Bomb. Jeff Hardy's Swanton Bomb. It's a senton, but because of who did it and how it was done, it got elevated. It became something else. The technique was different. It looks impactful. It's incredibly graceful. It can sometimes come out of nowhere, but generally there's a build to it. There's a move before it that sets it up. Or again, in tag team wrestling, Matt hits his finish and then Jeff hits his finished, and it's a 1-2. There's no way you're getting up for that. You'd be doing it off the turnbuckle, a 10-foot ladder, a 12-foot ladder, a 20-foot ladder, doing it off the rigging for the arena, doing it off entranceways, doing it off trucks outside, doing it off anything, doing it off the Hell in a Cell cage. It looks impactful. It looks graceful. It's iconic. It gets people out of their seats. Still to this day, people get up out of their seats to look at this move.
I do think you're so right about the versatility of it with what he did, like the fearlessness, even his kind of suicidal gun kind of maneuver that he would like his hand gestures before he would leap. But I don't think it looked impactful. Like it looked impactful later, like when he was older and he would just pancake them. And I was like, this guy's not even trying. I guess, and we have a wrestler with us, but I guess when someone's doing the splash, they can protect the person under them. I don't know how you protect somebody when you're landing on your back on their front. I'm not really sure where the gimmick of that is. But before
it's
that,
kind of the same as like, like a senton, a normal senton someone would do. Like if the impact is like as their back hits you, it's forward momentum. So it's like it feels like a hard tap versus a pancake, like, So if he hits it perfectly, he's just gonna bounce off you and you'll feel it, but it won't hurt.
But his early ones were like were very elegant, but to the point where I was like, did he even touch him? Like it was very graceful.
Yeah, sometimes they were so.
And for
graceful.
me, I was like, oh well, did that knock the person out? Like. It's not an elbow to the heart or nothing. It's this light pillow with his little fluffy hair. But the later ones, they look really tough. But that would be my point with that.
I guess at WrestleMania 17, he was going through people through tables. So, that looked incredible. Like,
you like the table ones, don't you? 3D.
Yeah. But I think that was a real...
Are you a violent person? I hear like
it was a real good time for innovation. I think I came in at the right time. But Richie, you've probably taken a swanton or a senton.
I have. I have. Yeah. As I said, it depends on the person giving them. Like I've taken sentons that are like the wind gets taken out of it. Like I wrestled a guy this year called Big Damo who wrestled in WWE as Killian Dane. He was Insanity and stuff like that for a while, and we brawled out to the outside, and we were like fighting in the bar. And he slammed me on the ground in the bar, which hurt like hell anyway. And then he stood on top of me with 2 feet like this. And I was already winded because he's a heavy guy. He's like 300 pounds or something like that. And then he just jumped into a senton, but he landed like straight on me. Like, and I was like, I felt like for like a couple of seconds afterwards, I couldn't breathe because that was just like all impact. But most of the time, they just kind of bounce off. I think with Jeffs, when I think of them, I think of the more memorable ones, which would be the ones off the ladders and through the tables and stuff like that. He has won some great matches with it, and obviously I think he won the world title with it and stuff like that. But I always do think of more of the stunts than the actual move. But I think it definitely should be considered. I think it's one of the most memorable. As far as like, there's a lot of high flying moves. Obviously, one is pitched quite early. There's moonsaults and swantons and elbows and corkscrews and all that kind of stuff. But I think the only two you'd probably put or even consider for a Mount Rushmore will be the Swanton Bomb on the elbow. So let's keep it up.
Cool.
All right. Very good. So we already have a good list of options to kind of choose from. But before we get into the next station, let's do a little bit of like a lightning round, kind of walk through some. They're not, I wouldn't call them honorable mentions because they still have the ability to get in there. Like there's so many that we're missing. I might kick it off with one of my favorites that I haven't mentioned, which is the Razor's Edge. We haven't had a power bomb yet, which is surprising because that is, again, a move where it really feels like it's got some luster to it, that it's got some impact. But I've always loved that other element where Razor actually gets them up over. He's a big guy, but he would do that to some large men. And I always loved it. Again, there's a little bit of extra element, a little bit of showmanship to it. I love the name. I just love the machismo of that character anyway. And then it was the Outsider's Edge later. But yeah, I am 100% a big fan of the Razor's Edge.
All right. I will go in with the one that I'm surprised wasn't mentioned, Tombstone Piledriver. So I think obviously very iconic Undertaker's finish. He's the only one that's really kind of like Triple H with the pedigree. You'll only ever think of the Undertaker. I love that the Undertaker had a collection of different finishes. Like he had the Last Ride, which was a powerbomb. He had the chokeslam. He had the Hell's Gate, but the Tombstone was his big finish. A couple of memorable ones was the Elimination Chamber match with Batista. I don't know if you guys remember the finish of this, but Batista had outside, because like obviously the cell was level with the ring, and he was out on the cell, and he had the Undertaker on his shoulder, and the Undertaker grabbed onto the cell and pushed himself towards the rope, and they flipped back into the ring into a tombstone position. And I was just like, that's amazing. I've never seen anything like that in my life, especially for someone as big as Batista. And another memorable one will be the finish to WrestleMania 25, Michaels and Taker, which is probably one of the greatest wrestling matches of all time. Michaels kicks out of the tombstone, which is really, really memorable kick out, but the actual finish to the match is Michaels goes for a moonsault off the top and Taker catches him and hits him that tombstone. So yeah, tombstone.
Very good.
Very good.
I don't even know how I didn't get into that list earlier, actually.
Yeah.
It's arguable to get into the top 4, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I had on my kind of longer list, I had both those moves. I loved the Last Ride. I think it's like that was literally elevated powerbomb, just brought to the next level. That just was like, I felt so sorry for anyone who had to take that move. It's already bad enough being up that high, and then he brings you even higher. I have this one for Richie because Richie's waiting for the rando finish. So here's my rando finish. William Regal's Brass Knucks.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
I love that.
Was that like his actual finisher?
Well, no, he would use it at the end of a match. So it was the last move, you know.
Have you guys ever seen the TV match where William Regal wrestled the Big Show and the ref's back was turned and he put on the brass knucks and he brass knucked the Big Show and the Big Show's knocked out on his feet? But instead of falling backwards, he falls forward onto William Regal. And then the ref counts to 3 and the Big Show wins the match while he's already been knocked out by the brass knucks.
Brilliant.
That's very clever.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I'm really happy you satisfied me with a really obscure pick.
Yeah.
Like there's obviously like a lot more that like can be mentioned. I'm sure, Chris, you have a couple as well. I just kind of wanted to very quickly because, again, it's another elephant in the room. I know you mentioned it very briefly earlier, Chris, but I think we should at least talk about the RKO for a little bit. I know it's quite similar to the Diamond Cutter, quite similar to the Stunner. It might not make the list for that reason. Like if you're doing a Mount Rushmore, you're not really going to put the RKO in the Stunner. I think the Stunner has a better chance than the RKO. I think the RKO is probably a better finishing move, though, even if it doesn't make our list. But I feel like it really should be considered. It is the most out of nowhere move. You think about Evan Bourne going for the shooting star into the RKO. It can happen anywhere. It does happen anywhere. I think he's done a really good job of getting it over. And I think that if you were to say to any casual wrestling fan, name a finishing move, they're going to get to RKO really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And you think about the likes of Cena and all those guys from that era, you wouldn't say Attitude Adjustment, you wouldn't say anyone else's finish, you will say RKO. I think as fast as you'd say Stunner.
That's true. No, it is true. Yeah, like I deliberated on that myself whenever I was kind of compiling my own, and I was like Stunner, and it's like I'm not moving from Stunner. Another one that I love, it probably won't make the list, but it's just a personal favorite, is JBL's Clothesline from Hell.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That just makes you do the EU face where you're just like, ew. Like, what? Oh, my God. Like, that's the thing where if he gimmicked that, I can't see where it's gimmicked. And I've heard the stories of how he can get a little tough in the ring with some of the opponents, but that one, it's just a good time. You know, like it's out of nowhere, but like it's just crushing. There's something about the meatiness of him too, where he just comes in just ripping a head off. So I'm a big fan of the Clothesline from Hell.
I saw a clip on Twitter. It was like JBL used to clothesline people like they owed him money, like, and that's true, like, because he would just fucking kill them, like, it was like. And again, that's another move you see clothesline every match, but JBL's clothesline very different.
It was just his. Yeah, no one else can even do it anyway close. It's just. Is it the rotation or what is it that he just?
I think it's more like a punch with
so much into it.
It's like a bicep punch, you know. Take your fucking head off.
That's up there for me for sure.
I'll whistle stop one or two more. I love submissions. Cripper crossface, great one. I do like the curb stomp although I don't know if it's like an iconic finish, but I think it is a cool finish. And then just to have a bit of Irish representation, because Richie brought Father's Head last time, I'm going to say Finn Balor's Coup de Grace, I think, is a cool move. It's very particular. It can only be done in one place. Obviously, it needs a setup to come off the top ropes and that double foot stomp, but it looks absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
You know, like legit move. And I've heard it is a terrifying one to take. There's a lot of trust involved. So yeah, but just throw that in there.
Okay. I think there's a couple more that should just be at least mentioned. I think submission-wise, nobody's mentioned Sharpshooter. I think Sharpshooter.
I know
one of the most.
I was expecting one of you guys to do that.
Yeah, I you know, and it was like I think Sharpshooter is probably it's my favorite submission anyway. I think that and the figure 4 leg lock should just be put out there and mentioned briefly. I think figure 4 maybe less so because it was established more by Flair and WCW and stuff. We kind of missed that, so we're specifically going for our taste. But
the
I think
figure 8 then, right?
The figure 8, yeah. But I think Sharpshooter, I think no one ever did it like Bret Hart, and I think it was such an important submission, and it looked legit. It was legit, and just that visual, especially with him just sitting there and locked in. I'm thinking of WrestleMania 13, you know, with Austin with the blood, and he's in that Sharpshooter.
Yeah.
So I think
and a great name too. It's got a great name.
Yeah. And I know Sting had it technically first in Scorpion Deathlock and all that, but who cares? A couple of other ones. You mentioned DDT. I think DDT should be mentioned just because of Jake. I think, I know it's not very impactful, but I think it's really important move 619, Rey Mysterio. I think it's like just should be said at least.
Cool.
Put out there. Just so
it's
people
so
know.
different, isn't it?
Yeah. It doesn't look like it hurts at all, but it's cool looking.
It is. And it's one of those things that, like, from my perspective, a little bit of insight, like when I was starting as a wrestler, I did a lot of these like family shows where like you would go and do random hotels in the middle of nowhere where they would just go to see, it would be advertised as American wrestling, and the kids would just go and see it. They wouldn't know who anyone was, and you go out and play different characters every show, and I'd always just play random heels and stuff. All of the matches always had moves that wrestlers would do that would be that the fans would know, and it was always RKO, Swanton Bomb, Spear, and 619. And you would have one guy that would always wear a lucha mask and go out and be the lucha. He would usually get a lucha chant. He would do a 619 and he would sell hundreds of masks for the promotion. So if you think about it like that, the kids, we don't think it's that impactful, but the kids fucking love it. So I think that's kind of the last one. There's a couple of other small ones like F5, Brock Lesnar if you want to streak and whatever else. But
I have a question for you guys.
Yes.
Like, what about the frog splash? But which person's frog splash?
5-star frog splash. Please, no.
We've got 5-star. We've got Eddie Guerrero, but I've always been a fan of D'Lo Brown's frog splash. Do you remember that one?
Oh yeah, really good.
Like, he'd like put his hands like right between his legs and stick his legs like straight out in like a V shape, and then come back. And he had that chest protector on for like way too long. I was like, I think he hurt himself, and that just became a gimmick that he wore in the ring. But I was always a fan, so I don't know. Like the 5-star was so great because he would perform how devastating it was to him, which was a very smart psychological aspect. But I gotta say, I think maybe D'Lo's my favorite just because it's a little goofy, and I just always was amused by it.
Do you remember his secondary move, the lowdown? Do you remember that where he pick up the guy and do like the sit down thing?
Yeah,
I think you've ever seen that. It's a really cool move as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like we could go on for like 20 minutes listening moves, but like at some point
we got to
pull the plug.
We got to close it.
We do have to consider the curation of it. Like we're going to want to have a submission, we're going to want to have a strike or an impactful move, maybe have a high flying move, these kind of things. And like when one takes its place, it's tough to put another in. Like you say, if you're going to have a stunner, then do you have an RKO? And also, do you have a 3D? Because there's so like half of that move is an RKO, but it is a tag team move. So we got a lot of choices to make. We basically, in our list, when we kept going back and forth, we kept saying that's going on, but we also went through like 12 or 13 options. So I'm like, I don't know how we're going to decide this.
Do you want the brief short list of everything that we have so far? Well, it's not brief at all.
Okay, so
far we've got the Macho Man elbow, we've got the Hulk Hogan leg drop, we've got the Rhino Gore, we've got the ankle lock Ken Shamrock or Kurt Angle, we've got HBK Sweet Chin Music, we've got the 3D, we've got the Pedigree, we've got the Stunner, we've got Jeff Hardy's Swanton Bomb, Razor's Edge, Tombstone Piledriver, Walls of Jericho, Last Ride, William Regal's Brass Knucks, the RKO, JBL's Clothesline, Sharpshooter, Crossface, Curb Stomp, Coup de Grace, Frog Splash, 619.
Yeah,
Oh my
really
God.
good. Really good.
So I do like what you said, and I was thinking that when I was compiling the list. If I was making a Mount Rushmore right now, I would go with like a move, a strike, a top rope move, a submission. Yeah. I do like that as a template, but I'm also not married to it. So like, for example, if we decide our submission move, but if something really good should replace that, we don't have to have a submission in the Mount Rushmore. I don't think anyway. But I also think about like not having stuff that's too familiar. So you're not having RKO and Stunner. I completely agree with that. But I think that you don't necessarily have to have a strike move or a high flying move or a submission just for the sake of having in it. If there's a better move,
but it's a good way of getting the mind thinking. I think the kind of way to start whiffing it down. Like for my own head, I would say as a fan, I always like the high flying moves the best. So I'd nearly start there at my own mind. So I'd be thinking, is it the elbow or is it the swanton?
I think it's the elbow.
I think it's the elbow.
Okay. Yeah. And he's on our logo.
Yeah.
So Jesus.
You have to put him in. And I think when we mentioned like when you're going through a list of finishes, if you just say name finisher, you get to RKO very quickly. You wouldn't get to elbow very quickly, but you think about the history of wrestling and Macho Man and that move and what it is, and the more you think about it, the more I think it really does deserve that place on the list.
It does.
For sure. So we're looking at already, so we've got Macho's elbow. He's on that list. All right. So then there's a Stunner as well, which I think we all just kind of giggled about. But is it a thing where does the Stunner, do we say it's Stunner versus RKO? Like, does the Stunner take that?
I think the Stunner easily takes it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think as I said, I think the RKO is a better move, and it's got a lot more legs out of it because the Stunner is very basic for what it is. The RKO has always evolved and always changed, and always the out and over aspect of it and whatever else. But I think the Stunner is probably the most memorable finish in wrestling you could ever think of.
I think it is.
I think it'd be really hard to take the Stunner off the list. But I think you're right. I think we just get rid of RKO right now. That means we're probably gonna have to get rid of 3D as well, to be perfectly honest. But I do like the idea of maybe on a further episode revisiting tag finishers at some point as well, because I think there's a lot of legs in that. But I like what Chris said about like it kind of ends in that motion of the cutter, so it'll be very hard to put a Stunner and an RKO and a diamond cutter and a 3D.
Yeah, go along with that.
Your best cutters. So I think we just cut them out for now. So Stunner and elbow.
So we're thinking of strikes. Like we had a nice few strikes, and we've got Sweet Chin Music. We've got Brass Knucks. Clothesline from Hell. What else we got? Like you could even like bring in some of the more recent, like Daniel Bryan's knee and those sort of things. But
the Gore as well. That kind of feels
the Gore fits that side. That fits that side.
Yeah, it fits that side of like just like running into some of that impact.
Yeah,
that crash. To me, like I always loved Sweet Chin Music. Yeah, it's iconic.
I can't get that visual of him hitting John Cena with it out of my head in that match I mentioned, the Iron Man match. And WrestleMania 12 is the first time I ever watched as a kid. I've never been so conflicted because Bret Hart I knew was the best wrestler. Shawn Michaels was my favorite wrestler. And seeing him hit that Sweet Chin Music, it's just forever ingrained in my childhood brain. I think as far as strike finishes go, it's probably the best wrestling one, to be honest. I think it'd be hard not to put Sweet Chin Music up there. And if you think about the way it's flown now, you had the elbow, the Sweet Chin Music, the Stunner. There's a nice little variety there. And then you just put Hogan's leg drop in, and that's it. We're sorted. Like that's your list. Like there you go.
Well, we already have a leg move. He uses his leg to knock someone.
They're very different. They're very different.
One guy's standing up, one guy's lying down.
It's still a strike. He's running at them. I think
it's funny how you said like it's not devastating, but you're like he's crushing a guy's face. It's like that sounds pretty devastating to me.
Gently resting across his neck.
Yeah.
Just to finish up, I think we're probably all in agreement on the Sweet Chin Music. But again, the only thing we're kind of leaving out there is at a time when wrestlers were fucking massive guys. Shawn Michaels was a smaller guy. he looked like physically he looked like a mid-card guy. He was smaller than Bret Hart, who he was going up against, and he became the top guy. And he became the top guy because his finish could beat the bigger guys.
Yeah,
And that finish was the Sweet Chin Music. So, you know, when you've made that connection, that leap, that shows you how powerful that move is. So it's beyond head strike.
And I think that's our out of nowhere move as well. And I think we, like, one of the most famous ones was the 96 Royal Rumble, the Final Four. And it was Diesel eliminated someone as Shawn Michaels eliminated someone. And the camera work on this is absolutely perfect because you see Diesel eliminate, and as he turns around, Sweet Chin Music just hits him. And he goes straight over the top and lands on his feet. And he won the Royal Rumble because he had a move that he could just hit out of nowhere. Diesel couldn't jackknife there because, like, his finish has to be loaded up. So I really love that the only reason he won, in my child brain, the only reason he won the Royal Rumble is because he had that move in his arsenal. Otherwise, he can't beat Diesel. Diesel's too big. Diesel's too strong. He couldn't throw Diesel over the top ropes, but the Sweet Chin Music could put him over the top ropes.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's really tough to argue that. But at the same time, it's tough to, like, we didn't even bring it up in our initial couple of rotations, but the Tombstone is just, it feels like there's such a legacy to that. I kind of feel now like, are we actually leaving the Tombstone out of this? Like,
and it was something I thought you would have actually mentioned. Sorry to cut you off when you mentioned the Tombstone about, like, the significance of how he actually pinned people out of it as well. I actually left that because I thought something you would have picked up on is, like, the hands across the chest and the pin down. I just find that so iconic as a setup as well.
I mean, it's named after him being an Undertaker, but then other characters in other organizations who use it call it the Tombstone, which has nothing to do with their character. It's just like you look at that and go, "Yep, that's the Tombstone." You're like, what? It's a great name too. You know, it sounds so cool.
I don't think his Tombstone looked good though. If you go back to those earlier days, you know, his more early,
it was pretty devastating.
But you could see, like, the head was like 6 inches above the ground. It was very safe. Now, it's not a bad thing because like, a Piledriver is terrifying, but it didn't look all that convincing in the early days. Obviously, later it did. But just saying, at the beginning, it was a little bit ropey.
And it does have that pageantry around it, like the setup where it's like he hits the chokeslam, and does the Tombstone is kind of coming. I think he had to be kind of safer with it because obviously the first few ones looked like death, like you could have legit injured someone. And then it's that famous story about, like, when he beat Hogan for the title, Hogan, like, was like, "Oh, you got me, brother," and he played up that he got it, even though he watched it. He was like, head was like that for
that's
half
it.
So I think since then, because he was a younger guy, then he was probably like, "I'm going to make sure that nobody gets hurt from this because it's a pretty important finish."
Oh, it is, really important.
It'd be hard not to put the Tombstone up there, to be perfect.
But then we're losing a submission, and do we want a submission to get recognized in our list? That's tough. Like, as you guys even said, like, around that early 2000s, like, that's where a lot of submissions really kind of flourished, and it became another piece of language that these wrestlers could use in storytelling. And in fact, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the ankle lock, the Ken Shamrock one, was the first time that they went to tapping out because he has the Ultimate Fighter background, the mixed martial arts background. So before that, people would just say, "I quit." So it would verbalize it. But that move actually brought in the visual representation, which is actually really great because then from that point on, throughout the 2000s, especially, of course, with the Kurt Angle's ankle lock, that just became its own way. Like, you're actually now talking about a completely different way to end a match that didn't exist before. And now submissions existed, but tapping out didn't. But it's really difficult to kind of complete a Mount Rushmore when we're removing one of the ways in which you could defeat your opponent. Like, so it's going to be tough to leave out a submission in general. And ankle lock, I'm a big fan.
I honestly would put the Sharpshooter ahead of it, and that's just my personal feeling on it. I think the Sharpshooter is probably the most iconic finisher of all time. I love it. I love Bret Hart. I love what that move was, and I love everything. Your pitch in the ankle lock was very strong, but I would put the Sharpshooter ahead of it. Like, that's just me.
I expected you both to say that anyway. Like,
I thought it was going to come up. I left it out. I did a Paul Bush on it. I left it out hoping someone else would say. So no one said stunner until the last round.
True,
yeah. So I think if you want to get, like, a bit of a short list of the possibilities that we have for that last spot. So, like, I was like, I'm still kind of fighting a little bit for the leg drop. We've got the Tombstone. We've got a submission maybe. Is there anything else that we want to still consider so we can kind of break this down a little bit quicker from the list?
Looking at my list here, brass
Are we
knucks.
okay to drop like pedigrees and Razor's Edge and Orkel is obviously gone. Everything else is gone. Like, is there anything else that we want to shortlist out of those candidates?
I think we're pretty good with those. I like how Tombstone snuck in there, but yeah,
You did
think
make
it
me
is.
think about the Tombstone now, in fairness, of pulling that in and pushing out a. But then I am feeling like there's a lot, like we do have a few things from a certain era,
Yeah.
and
I just
You
think
know.
like you know my feelings on the leg drop if you want me to go on about it again, but as I said, we would not be having this conversation. I would not be a professional wrestler. The Attitude Era wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have had wrestling. You wouldn't be having that fancy WrestleMania logo behind you. I wouldn't have all these figures behind me, and if it wasn't for that leg drop. And it wasn't like it was everything around that leg drop. I think it's the most important wrestling move of all time. Whether it makes the list or not, I want somebody here to acknowledge it. Acknowledge me. That is the most important.
It is iconic, but it's of the era of the elbow, and I think the elbow is a better finish. But I think Hogan could have done any finish. It was who he
Yeah.
was, not necessarily the move.
So are we saying that we go with like if it was a choice, it would have to be the elbow or the leg drop?
I just never think the leg drop is a good finish.
Okay.
I think it has drama, but I don't think it's a. I
But
don't think it ever makes me
How did I
feel.
sell you on it though? How did I sell you?
You
on
saw
it?
me on a story, but I don't look at it and think. I never believe it causes the outcome it causes, if that makes sense. Like,
Okay.
I believe the elbow, I believe the stunner, I believe sweet chin music, I believe the angle lock. I can have that suspension disbelief. I never
Okay.
believe the people's elbow. I don't believe the leg drop. Chris is nodding as he's
Chris,
agreeing, I presume. Is it?
Chris, you never mentioned the people's elbow. I'm very upset about that. I thought you were going to say
I did. I
thought it
did.
was one of your
How
two
it's
picks.
ridiculous. No,
Okay,
no.
yeah. I thought it was
No,
gonna
I
be
think
one
it's
of your picks.
ridiculous.
Where do you stand on the leg drop before we it looks like we're going to scrap
I
it?
think you're totally right about the legacy of it, but I do agree with Paul. It's more about him rather than the actual drop. Again, even the most iconic spot from the Andre the Giant is a body slam. It's not even the finisher, which tells me everything I need to know about the finisher. Because if that was the most memorable part, we would be the ones remembering it. But no, it's the body slam is it. So I don't think it's in there. I think it's actually submission or tombstone, to be honest. That's where I think we're at.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we're really between the ankle lock and the tombstone. Now, whether it's the ankle lock or the angle lock or the tombstone, it feels like we all liked the ankle lock and we all do like the tombstone.
Well, I'm also
Burning
knowing
building, you
that
have
I
to save
love
one.
the sharpshooter and knowing that one of us prefers a sharpshooter and we've stolen the leg drop away from him.
Okay,
I think
yeah.
if I was to think about it, like I'm very torn on this because I do like the idea of Tombstone sneaking in there. We've made some really valid points, and we're all on board with Tombstone. But I'm resorting back to the template that we've all created secretly in our heads before we even went in about having a really good strike with the sweet chin music, a really good traditional-ish wrestling move with the stunner. You've got your high flying move, and then thrown in a submission. I think makes a lot of sense. Even though Tombstone does sneak in, I just can't put the ankle lock ahead of the sharpshooter. I just can't do it. Like I'd have to tear down all this wrestling memorabilia if I did that. It's just not. It's
to
not.
be honest, though, like
Sure your
it's
wife would
not
be
a
happy.
hill. It's not a mount I'll die on. To be honest,
I thought it was going to die.
It's my
I thought it was going to die on the Hogan
favorite.
mount.
It's my favorite move, but would I even argue that is the best submission? Yeah, I would, but like I don't think it's too much of an argument. I think the sharpshooter has a longer legacy, and we're looking for legacy. That's what you're looking for the leg drop. We can kind of replace that with the sharpshooter because I mean that thing. Talk about impact to the history of the business. That was the Montreal Screwjob moment. Happened with a
Really
sharpshooter. So
what a point!
So I'm taking back my Ken. You guys have walked me back from Ken Shamrock, then to Kurt Angle, and now I'm just leaping over to Bret Hart and the sharpshooter. So I think in practicality, it is the one that deserves the spot. It's just I'm super partial personally to the ankle lock.
Yeah.
But
So would we?
I can see sharpshooter sliding in there.
Are we going sharpshooter over Tombstone? Is that like?
Yeah.
I for me, I'm sort of like, I'm stuck in that structure. I really want a submission. When I got into wrestling, I just loved submission matches. So for me, it's big to have a submission move in this. I'll admit the Sharpshooter is not my favorite, but if you guys both are on for the Sharpshooter, go for it. But for me, I think it has to be a submission. The final slot.
Yeah. Then it has to be a Sharpshooter.
Okay, I'm happy with that because
sense.
it is iconic and it gave us that Austin moment and it gave us the Montreal Screwjob. It gave us plenty of moments and it looks fucking sore. So I'm happy with that.
All right.
Got it. We
so
did
Richie, give us the final countdown. What's our
this is
Mount
the
Rushmore
final.
of wrestling finishers?
Well, the final this time isn't as disputed as the last one. This is actually undisputed. The Mount Rushmore of wrestling finishers. We've got Sweet Chin Music by Shawn Michaels. We've got the Stone Cold Stunner. We've got the Flying Elbow by Macho Man Randy Savage, and we've got the Sharpshooter by Bret the Hitman Hart. What a list!
Yeah, it's
good. Bret and Shawn are in the top. Wow.
Jesus, there you go.
Yeah,
Very good.
I love it, guys.
Really
That's
good.
it. I love it. Well, that's a wrap on this episode. For the listeners, thank you so much for watching or listening. And before we go, Rich, can you tell them where they can find us?
Yes, if you can go to at Mount Rushmorons, pretty simple. We're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, and we're on Twitter at the moment. We will be on hopefully Blue Sky and a couple of other platforms after that as well. But I think YouTube will be the best place to go if you want to support the channel. Just hit that like button. That's the best place to find us, the best place we can reach out. But as I said, we are available on Spotify as well, but YouTube will be the best.
Yeah, and let us know what your Mount Rushmore would be. Would you have it the same as us? Would you swap one out? Do you want more submissions or less submissions?
And I will say, if you disagree with this list, I will personally come to your house and put you in a Sharpshooter. So how about that?
Well, Paul got him in the crippled crossface on the other side.
That's it.
Fantastic. All right, guys. Thank you so much. This has been fun. And I'll see you next time for another episode of the Mount Rushmorons. Take care.